Hi everyone, and thanks a lot to Jana from Luxa to invite me to talk about designing for and with strong emotions. So in this session, we will focus on how you, as someone who works in service design or is very interested in service design, can design for and with strong emotions. But let me tell you a little bit more about myself. So my name is Remco Vermeulen, and I'm the VP of Product Innovation at Coa Health. Well, from background, I am a designer. I studied innovation management and product design engineering at Delft University in the Netherlands, and further on studied psychology at Leiden University. But during the past 20 years, I had the honor to work with some great companies on very innovative projects, as the likes of Warner Brothers, Financial Times, Wallpaper Magazine, Telefonica, O2, and Electrolux. And as you don't innovate alone, I had the luck to set up collaborations and work together with some great teams from Harvard Medical School and the Royal College of Art. But let me tell you a little bit more about what Coa Health really is. The objective and the mission of Coa Health is to create simple, personal, and accessible mental health support. So when I started the project in 2013, which later turned into Coa Health, I found out that the taboo and care in mental health could use some improvement. Most people didn't really get access to mental health care, didn't know they had a mental health care or mental health issue at all. And when they got access, it was mostly in the form of a face-to-face visit, and the benefits of mobile or personalized care were only at the start of being explored. So, access and awareness to good care was and still is a big and huge issue. And just to show you how big of an issue mental health really is, let me share you some high level stats. 25% of the world population will have a mental health issue during their life. Imagine that. Of your four colleagues or friends, one will have depression, anxiety, or obsessive compulsive disorder, bipolar syndrome, or any other mental health condition. One in four. Now let's go to the specific conditions. So before COVID, anxiety and depression, which are one of the most common mental health conditions, had a prevalence, which means the amount of people that really have it, was 8.1% for anxiety and 6.5% for depression. So the Centers for Disease Control gave these numbers, and what they did is they checked it out during COVID at certain points in June and in December last year, how these numbers were evolving. And the increases were staggering. Anxiety went up from 8.1% to 36.9%. And depression went from 6.5% to 30.2%. So 1 in 3 of your colleagues or friends currently has anxiety, and another one has depression. See the massive impact that has on people's lives. Well, and when anxiety and depression get too much to bear for people, unfortunately, suicidal ideation starts. Now, before the crisis, this was 4.3%. So 4.3% were thinking or ideating about that the world might be a better place without them. Now, during the COVID, and this is a number from June, it went up to 10.7%. So 1 in 10 people has been thinking that the world would be better if they would not be there. Well, ideation about this and actually doing it, unfortunately, are not the same. Sorry, fortunately, are not the same. But still, every year, 100,000 people in between Europe and the US do end their life. And just to show that in real terms, That means that the amount of people that fit in a plane like this die every day. Well, let's go back to service design. So I hope I convince you that designing for a better mental health and mental well-being is worth it, and especially now. What mental health conditions have in common is that your emotions are stronger, both positive and negative, than people without mental well-being concerns. But going back to the service design, when we talk about service design, one core tool is designing the user journey. And user journeys are very, very pretty. We put them in books, we draw them out, we add colors to it, we define how the experience might be. We put in their thoughts, sometimes we put in the actions that we have, and we draw out how that user journey can be or is currently based on user interviews. And we can take a variety of ways of visualizing these. And as data visualization is always very interesting, this can take different forms. But these are inputs for how we should design a service or how a design service should be or how it currently is. But of course, people are really different. And what comes into play in customer journey maps or service design blueprints is often that reality is more complex. And in this user journey map, you already see that you start to have infinite loops, which I wouldn't advise anyone to have an infinite loop in their user journey. And that they start to add in feelings. So how do you feel at a certain point of time? But that is all based on one condition, and that's a condition that everyone is the same during the whole user journey. So in your product or your journey to, let's say, buy a sweater, everyone feels the same at any given point of time. Well, we all know that that is not really true. And I'm going to use one metaphor, and I'm going to hang it from one metaphor. And that metaphor is the flow of a river. So let's say that here there is a river, and as you can see in this river, there's different flows, and the river adapts itself to different conditions. So you see, you can take different routes to go from A and to end up in B. As a metaphor for our user journey, where we go from, let's say, awareness to not being a customer anymore. Well, as you see, there's a lot of different routes. And on top of it, if you see the route, you start seeing that the user journey changes a lot. And it changes based on different conditions. But you could say as well, like it changes on where the water, or let's say the end user, finds a different route to get easier and faster from A to B. So for water, that is like, how can it go as fast as possible from A to B, and what's easiest? Like, so a narrow path will be avoided, a wide path will be preferred, a large inclination will be preferred than something that's really flat, because that's gravity. But if we go back to the user journey, we could say, okay, if we're having this user journey, what has huge impact as well on our user journey is how someone feels. So if we add this layer of how you feel during this whole user journey, your journey might look really different if you go from A to B. So let's put some thoughts on here. So imagine that you are in the Amazonas, in this river, and you're not going to go from A to B. So now how do you feel? Are you anxious? Are you full of energy? You might feel a little bit low. Are you inquisitive? Are you excited? How do you feel at that moment? So take 1 second and close your eyes and think of, how would you feel if you would be in the Amazonas and you would have to go from A to B in this river? Well, let's get back. Let's look at some scenarios. So one scenario would be that you're from there, you live there, you have been there your whole life, your family is there, you grew up there. So most probably you feel very confident. And the river is just like any river, like any highway for other people. And you're actually out there to hunt. You go hunting, you go fishing, and you know where to go. Or This boy, so he's from there as well, but he's still young. So he's most probably more inquisitive. He wants to try out things, do weird stuff that kids do, play around, and have a bit more of an inquisitive mode of going through the river. Um, so he might go from A, take the big path, and know precisely where to go on the right of the island, the left of the island to get to B. He might know, like, oh, you shouldn't take that route because that's a bit of a dangerous one, or you should take that one because it's faster. So he would know it in and out and is very confident about it. But now think that you go on a holiday. You go on a holiday to the Amazonas, and you are out there just to have some fun. You're there for a week. You're with a guide. The guy knows everything in and out, all the animals, the river, etc. And you're reasonably close to the city. So while you're floating around in your hollow tree trunk, you might want to explore a bit and do some fun stuff and go left and right. You might not go really that fast. So you go from A to B, but if you don't get to B, maybe you'll stop halfway. But now think the day progresses and it becomes evening. And if it becomes evening, people experience already changes a lot. So I've seen people that if you start to see this image, for example, it becomes really relaxing. You start to hear the animals in the forest, in the jungle, and the water calms down. You start to see some little fishes jumping out of the water, and it becomes really nice and beautiful. You become very, very relaxed. Well, other people might start to hear the chirping of animals in the forest and know that you have to actually sleep in one of these hammocks in the forest and might become slightly anxious. But let's go back to the guy in the tree trunk. A journey for him might be that, you explore, you go to a small little part of the river to see more of the jungle. You might go to the left, a little bit to the right, and you might want to explore a little bit more. But now let's go back to the mental health part. So what if you're halfway and you come across this guy? You feel really anxious in it. Most probably this, you want to get out of it. Like, this is freaking scary. Like, you don't want to get your toes out in the water. The hollow tree trunk starts to feel a bit like a death trap. Or what if you're in the jungle and actually you come across this guy? Now it becomes really scary. So most probably what I want to do is you already hear my voice, I become really anxious. Adrenaline starts pumping. I just want to get out of here. I want to go from A to B, like, get it over with. Get me in a car, get me in a helicopter. I want to get out of here. So as you see, your journey from A to B changes a lot based on your emotions. And the same is true of your user journey, the service design or the service blueprint for your product or your service that you are designing. Well, now that's all nice, the metaphor of a jungle, but how would you apply that to a normal product? So for that, I'm going to use two examples. So one of them is bipolar syndrome, talking about mental health when there's always strong emotions involved. One of them is bipolar syndrome, and the other one is a product that we did for stress and anxious feelings, and even we might get to people that have a certain level of anxiety. So let's go for the first one, bipolar disorder. So for the people that don't really know what bipolar disorder is, it is a condition called manic depression as well, where, as manic depression says, is a mix between you have a big depression, you might have a mixed period in the middle, and you have a manic episode. Well, depression, as you might know, means that you don't have the energy to do anything. You don't even have the energy sometimes to brush your teeth, to go out there. Everything is too much, and everything looks like it's a disaster, and everything goes wrong. And that state of mind that can last from weeks to months to even people that have it for several years. Well, a manic episode is when you have a lot of energy. You might sleep 3 hours a night, you're full of ideas. You want to go out and about, you want to go partying, you go completely off the rails and you start spending a lot of money. So on one side, depression, the other part, the manic episode, and in the middle, something called being euthymic, and that's what we'll go into a little bit more. But to have the impact of bipolar disorder, it's pretty impressive. So people that have bipolar disorder, they live on average 20 years less than people without bipolar disorder. And they're at 60 times suicide risk compared to the general population. Well, that's all very bad, but happily there's a solution as well. So if you do psychoeducation and with the right education, you can bring down the amount of time that you have an episode. An episode is that, you go off the track and you actually have to go to hospital often. You can bring down from 600 to 150 days. And although treatments are still room for improvement, still 40% of people actually don't adhere to a treatment for bipolar disorder. Well, I'm going to take this reel and I'm going to focus on Carrie Fisher. And Carrie Fisher might look familiar because she was the actor who played Princess Leia in Star Wars. And she had manic depression or bipolar syndrome. Well, the part of the manic and the mania, as you call it in Spanish, is that it's for a lot of people is really interesting actually. So it's not all gloom and doom. It's actually very interesting. And she described it in this way about what the manic part of manic depression is for her. Well, she said it's sexual promiscuity, excessive spending, and substance abuse. It's like, a weekend in Las Vegas. So quite often it's difficult to get people off a manic period. But if we look again at the curve of, on one part, the depression, the mixed period, the manic part, there's something in the middle and it's called being euthymic. And euthymic means that you don't have any mood swings. So it's a period where you're reasonably stable. And you could say like people that don't have mental health conditions, you can have your bad days and you have your good days, but you don't have like massive mood swings from a depression to a manic period. Well, we created a product for that. And that product, we call it balance. So the objective of balance is that what we heard from people is that they actually would like to have a normal life and have it all in balance. And being in balance in this case means that the blue dot, as you see there, is who you are and what your current status is. That you would like to get it into the middle of like all the different combinations of how you could feel when you're manic depression or bipolar disease. So if you have the dot in the middle and you're balanced, you can say that's your euthymic me. And euthymic me is when you can reason really well. So when you're normal, you can think about what you should do and what you could have done. But if you're really depressed, you can't really do it. And if you're manic and you think you're like at the top of the world or the top of the hill, you can't think really and reason properly. You're not very objective. So what we did is for this condition, we detected if you were euthymic or not, or you were depressed or you were manic. And when you were euthymic, then we would focus on the time that you could pact with the doctor. You could say, okay, doctor, if this happens, I'm okay that this and this happens. For example, you can reach out to me, or we can work on a plan and we can work on progress, or we actually could do some education or therapy in this case. And for clinician, we showed it in this way. So you have the areas where you are in a manic situation or where you're in a depressed situation, where you're in a euthymic situation, you can actually see it. Well, that's for bipolar disorder. What we did too, and I said that number two, what we're going to focus on is a product that we created at Koa Health called Koa Foundations. So foundations focused on people that are really stressed or anxious, and in a setting of you being at work. So this is for employees of companies that now start to see that you need to do something about mental health, and it's becoming a bigger issue for everyone, including employees. And as part of foundations, we ask you, how are you actually feeling? And we do that in the way of asking if you're feeling down, if you have anxious thoughts, or if you're feeling overwhelmed or very stressed. And then the way how we go about it is two ways. Because when we're designing for emotions, we of course can try to solve emotions straight away. Like the spider, you want to get away from the spider. But on the other hand is, if next time you go through the same kind of alley or the same kind of river or the same kind of path, you might still find the spider out there. So we focus on like, okay, how can you avoid and get away from the spider right now? as well as how in the future can we help you to avoid spiders whatsoever. So looking here at the now, we look at how you can de-stress, how you can lower your anxiety right now, like run away from the spider. And we look as well, like later on, how can you work on, for example, not being afraid of the spider in the first place or not going through places where there are a lot of spiders. So that's where we look at programs to improve in the long term. So avoiding or not avoiding, but treating your situation right now as well as later, that together really helps people to feel better in the longer term. Just running away from the spider doesn't make you less afraid of the spider. But that brings in the question then, how do I know that you are feeling bad or really good? So how do we know that, how someone feels ongoingly? And that brings us to an area where we as designers, we now need to get the help of data scientists and engineers, because that's when we can make use of emotional AI. So emotional AI is detecting emotion through what you write, what you say, what you do, what you express, and what your body expresses. And that has a lot of different forms, and I'll explain it a little bit more later on. But I'm going to focus on one example, and you might have already seen the girl on the right, and she might look familiar to you. Well, her name is Charlie D'Amelio, and she's on TikTok and has a whopping 115 million followers and 9.3 billion likes. So a lot of people actually do know her. And she's on TikTok and does her dances. And she expresses her feeling, of course, in these kind of dances and videos that she has. So we're going to actually look now at, with these dances, how true are these emotions really? So here you go. There she goes. This is number one champion sound. Yeah, Estelle, we about to get down. Who the hottest in the world right now? Just touched down in London. Well, looks pretty happy, isn't it? So we're going to look at like how she expresses herself. And to do that, we're going to use a software that detects a person's emotion. It shows how they are in the video, focuses on their face, and then shows it. So let's see what that comes back. And there we go. So on the right, you have the positive emotions, and on the left, you have the negative emotions. So as you see, most of the time during the video, the expression stays on the right. And they still stay on the right, and she has like different kind of feelings about it, but it's all pretty positive. And even if you look at the bottom, you can see like this bar of happy going up. Now it's not there. Now there's no emotion because she had a hand in front of her face, but now she's pretty happy and actually goes up. Well, she's very happy actually, which is good. So you could say like artificial intelligence in this case is pretty good. No, like look what it does just by showing the videos. Well, now it looks like that Charlie is not doing all that great as it looks like on the videos. Actually, it looks like she's got some really serious mental health conditions. And in the quote that she gave, where she talks about her mood swings and where she says that one thought sets it off and suddenly my whole life is falling apart, that's something called spiraling thoughts. And it happens a lot where someone might be looking at you funnily or make a comment. And before you know it, you think you're going to all die alone under a bridge without any money whatsoever. So this area of artificial intelligence, which takes the bulk of the articles in the press and what you see about most, it actually doesn't work very well. So of everything that you see, what you do express in videos is not really good. Not only because the AI is not very good, but as well that if I smile now or look like this, artificial intelligence thinks that I'm really depressed or very happy, which doesn't say very much what's going on inside of me. I might think that, this would be my last talk, but actually it might be, I might be smiling. So you never find out really how I think. But notwithstanding that maybe how you express in a video might not be a good indicator, there still are really good indicators of how you actually feel and how your mental health is going. And that's by looking at what you say, but especially what you do and what your body expresses. So I'll show you just some simple examples of what we can do there and how design and your service design can come together with data science and artificial intelligence focused on emotion. And let's focus on, for example, what we mentioned before is if you feel depressed. So if you feel depressed, I sleep less, I don't move from the couch, and I don't call my friends often. Well, these are all signals that you can pick up. So if you sleep less, most probably you use your phone more. If you don't move from the couch, then most probably your GPS doesn't move very much because you don't get out of the house. And if you don't call your friends often, most probably in your phone, it shows that you don't have very many call records or you don't connect to people a lot in WhatsApp or in Instagram. Well, now, if you feel anxious, you might open and close your phone a lot, very fast. You might scroll faster through Instagram, or you check your email all the time. And sometimes you might actually have a faster, like a heart rate. Well, now, if you feel really stressed, you might start to get like sweaty hands. Your heart might start beating really differently and faster. You might get very upset faster with your colleagues or even with your partner. And sometimes, if you're really, really stressed and angry, you might get a shaky voice. Well, now going back all the way to Carrie Fisher and bipolar disorder, um, as mentioned, she would sleep less, she would talk way faster and in shorter calls. And you might be out on the street all day, and most of the night you might go partying the whole time. So now, if we go back to the root, to the user journey or what we had in the jungle, there's a lot of different routes. And you might check at point A how you feel, and based on that one, choose one route or the other. But maybe you need to start checking how people feel at different points in user journey. So not only at the start and the end, but maybe during your user journey, you need to have checkpoints like how are people feeling and how would that change? And find a way how you actually can change your route based on how people's mood changes. It might be that they start off really emotional into the jungle and they get halfway and they find the spider and then everything changes. So maybe you have to change your design of your service. You might have to have like the dotted lines, which means like, okay, you're here, maybe you go back here, or there's a different route if you're really upset or you're really, really positive, or you might move faster to the product. So, of all of this, I'm going to close with one big question to all of you to take home when you're designing your service or you're creating your service or analyzing how your user journey for your service or your product is going like, and look and think really well. How does your user journey adapt to changing emotions? And I would invite you to review that and improve the service design from here onwards. Thank you very much.